It's it says it's live now, and
Yes,
let's make sure.
indeed.
And we've got the now again.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, CNY Nation. My name is Dr. Randy Fink from CNY Fertility at the Miami Center of Excellence in sunny Miami, Florida. It is not sunny. Well, maybe it's sunny, but it's at least not warm in many other places where you may be watching. And joining me from the great north in Syracuse, as always, is Dr. Robert Kiltz. Dr. Kiltz, good afternoon, sir.
Dr. Randy Fink, thank you so much. It is upstate New York. It's a little cold and snowy, and I don't think there's much sun today, but we're all sunny inside.
We're all sunny inside, and that is a great way to look at life, wouldn't you say?
It's the best way to look at life. And the more we can bring sun and a positive attitude to our lives internally, I use the work in. It's so critical and important that we all practice that. We're all focused on working out, but we need to do the mindful set every day.
The mindful set. Indeed. Well, and on that topic, what I thought we could talk about today in our conversations, in our conversation hour together in this new series we'll call Conversations, has to do with some of that wellness type things, that whole thought about improving who we are as people, not just in the mind, but in the body. And to that end, as you know, one of the things that we do here in Miami is help people to be optimized and to feel and look their best. To that end, maybe several times a week, people ask me about keto, and keto is something that anybody who's familiar with your work knows is very close to your heart. So I thought maybe that would be a great thing to talk about because keto is way more than just a diet, right? It's way more than just about something to lose weight. It's about how to turn your body around. It's about fertility. It's about inflammation. It's about a whole lot of things. So when somebody says, Dr. Kiltz, what is your Kiltz keto? How do you answer that?
Well, number one, Kiltz's keto, in my opinion, is the game changer that I've learned over the years, and it's really about inflammation. It's an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, and I share it incessantly. Some days it's kind of someone wants to gag me or knock me out, and enough is enough. But what I've learned is this is the change all that we really need for our true health and wellness. I focus on what we put in the mind and the mouth and how critical it is to our lives. And so many people are suffering today. It took me a while to figure this out, but essentially, keto is a label of an anti inflammatory diet that I did 10 years ago. And it cleared away my bowel bleeding, my migraines, arthritis, psoriasis, kidney stones, and more. And I've seen so many women suddenly conceive and deliver a baby where there's nothing I could do to help. And I've seen guys who their sperm got better and there was conception naturally, but it really just rid so many diseases for so many of those suffering. So that's the
Well,
simple concept and idea that I've been sharing incessantly.
what is this? What is this inflammation? What is inflammation? What does it do to our bodies?
Well, let me just stop for 1 second, Dr. Fink, and thank you for joining. We have so many joining us today. It's Thursday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, and Dr. Fink and I have been coming up with this concept how to share, listen, and learn on a weekly conversation about health and wellness. Recognizing we're both in the fertility, physician, medical health and wellness world, but we wanted a method and way to share more concepts and ideas. So we are going to be answering some of the questions and comments. So hi to everyone joining us. We appreciate it. We're going to do this for about an hour. That's the intention. And but back to the question again, if you would reframe that.
Well, actually, and I have to say, my column there to the right was clicked on the wrong button, and I thought, gosh, nobody's watching us today. But now I clicked the right button, and Alicia and Christina and Sabrina and Naeed, and gosh, we go all the way down the list. We've even got Amy out in Colorado Springs in our Colorado Springs office. Thanks for being with us today, and Erica and Michaela, Monica. Lois, Nikki, Sarah, gosh, and Vanessa, if I didn't say that before, we sure are happy to have you here. So we're talking about keto and kiltz is keto. And you said as a way of framing it, that it's something that treats inflammation. And I think, we all hear this term inflammation, but I'm not sure that we all know what it means. So what is inflammation? What does it do to our bodies? And what can we do to treat it?
Well, the term inflammation, we kind of know it when we have swelling, redness, pain, dysfunction, or heat in any local area of our body. But what I'm learning is actually much of the inflammation is hidden deep within our bodies, but the same thing is happening not only on the outside skin or our joints or our brains with migraines or inside of our gut with irritable bowel and all sorts of things, but it's happening at the level of the ovaries, the uterus, the tubes, which is causing the dysfunction to the female reproductive organs. And it's happening in the male side to the male reproductive organs. So if you're not getting pregnant spontaneously and delivering a baby naturally, then you have inflammation, which is essentially the cause of all disease. And one of the things I've shared is basic 5 causes of all that inflammation. How can we solve inflammation? So we're either giving a drug, a surgical procedure to remove it, or we're adding other Eastern modalities like massage and acupuncture and herbs, or in my case, where I've shared the idea of the diet, my basic belief is that the diet is actually the cause of the inflammation and the diseases. And by looking at ways to remove it, we can help people in the conception. But if you're not conceiving and you're miscarrying or delivering early, the cause is inflammation. All diseases are caused by inflammation. Basically, you can't feel it or see it. Let's take endometriosis. I believe endometriosis is an intra-abdominal pelvic inflammatory disorder secondary to bowel inflammation. But you say you don't have any signs or symptoms of it, it's silent. But in actuality, infertility is not silent, it's screaming at us. And we need to dig deeper into finding out the cause, the source of the inflammation. But really, the keto concept and lifestyle is sort of my broad way of saying, here are some things you can do to heal it.
So if I burn myself on the stove, for instance, I can look at my hand or my arm as that's healing, and I can see the inflammation. But inflammation is deeper than the skin, yeah?
Well, it's deep within all of us. And so many people suddenly are diagnosed with cancer. It didn't just show up. Chronic inflammation is likely the cause. And if you think about a peanut allergy, right? So we eat a peanut and we have no problems. Some people eat a peanut, they have an anaphylactic reaction, they can't breathe, they need an emergency EpiPen or steroids, or they may succumb to that allergy and die. My sense is that you may not have the acute anaphylactic reaction, but my bet is so many of us in whatever disease we have, whether it's hypertension, diabetes, migraines, bowel problems, or infertility, it's essentially an allergic reaction to something getting in your body that you're allergic to. But our common signs or symptoms of allergies are sniffles and runny nose and redness and swelling or difficulty breathing, but not infertility.
So inflammation is the smoldering fire that we have within that we may feel completely normal, but it's still doing something to us. Would you say on a cellular level? Is that where it is, all the way down to the cells that make us up?
It's essentially a cellular dysfunction. Now, it may just be a few cells that are able to die and maybe repair themselves, or other cells within the area repair them, and you're fine, and reproduction goes on well. But for so many, the inflammation takes care of more cells in an organ that it's not able to easily repair itself and subsequently reproduce. But it's smoldering in all of us in one way or another. Uh, IBS, Crohn's, are just some of the simple signs of inflammation that we think it's just gluten, or a sensitivity to one thing or another. But I believe it's greater than that and smoldering at a greater level, but very, very slowly and silently. And typically, what do? We have a disease. We make the diagnosis, and in medicine we were learned organ system diseases, and they're all different, but we have a drug that's good for this organ system disease and this organ system disease and this one. But in actuality, the cause is all the same, but it's just a different organ system that we're suffering from, and most of us just can't quite figure that out because modern medicine tells us something different.
So you're saying that we all have some kind of disease process perhaps going on at the level of the cell, and that there's something that can treat that that isn't medication.
Well, we're either removing the insulting particle, or we're giving a drug that is going to help suppress our immune system's reaction to the foreign particle. That's really the two stages that we're working on here. Most of us don't recognize the real etiology or cause. So again, we've learned what's the treatment uh, of the inflammation, and it starts with simple things like aspirin, steroids. Uh, it might even be ice or heat to treat those things.
Now, actually, when we're talking about, and let's just actually take a step back for for people who don't think about things on the cellular level every day. If you remember back from probably second grade, you could take a toothpick and scrape the inside of your cheek, and you would smear it onto a glass slide and look at it through a microscope, and you would see the cells that make up the lining of our cheek. These cells are the very basis of our body. We have billions and billions of them that make up who we are. When toxic substances affect those cells, that's, if I understand you, Dr. Kiltz, that's what's causing inflammation. So where do these toxins come from?
Well, essentially, we breathe the air that contains the particles of other organisms and viruses, bacteria, yeast, other plant particles like pollen, dander, dust, and dirt from other animals, dogs, and cats, or humans around us. We know that it's in the air, the water, other fluids that we drink, and then it's also in the food that we eat. You can't get away from all of this stuff because you have to breathe and drink and eat. And so some of it is going to get into us. Some of us are more susceptible to these things than others, like the COVID virus. You can't see a cupful of COVID viruses attacking you. It must be such a small particle of things that actually cause a disease. But they either do it on our skin, in our mucous membranes, or they get deep into the gut where they then could travel everywhere in our body. And again, they could get in through breathing, eating, the skin, in so many ways. And much of it is a mystery because it's so microscopic.
Now, certainly when for those folks who have been through fertility treatments and especially who have been able to enjoy the gift of having a family through CNY, we have we
We lost Dr. Fink for a moment there, so hang on. Okay.
Uh-oh.
But
All right. Am I back?
we
Yeah.
got him back.
All
And
right.
by the
That's good
way,
to
we're
hear.
going to get to some of the questions. Becky, Shamika, Sheila, Judith. I mean, so many. So thank you for hanging in there. We're going to get to the questions. Go ahead, Dr.
Yep.
Fink.
And actually, and again, the CNY Nation, for those of you who've just joined, I'm Dr. Randy Fink in Miami, and Dr. Kiltz is with me from Syracuse. And we're talking about keto today. But before we get right into keto, what I said was folks who've gone through fertility treatment with us often get treated for some of that inflammation with some medications. But diet is also an important component, is it not?
Well, for me, diet is the most critical.
Is the most critical.
What we put in the mouth and our bodies in either frequency or amounts that may be the leading cause of all of our diseases. That I talk a lot about it because you have control of what you put into the body. And why not learn some ideas that might get you where you want to go? This label keto is something that I'd kind of like to throw out anyway. The idea of ketone bodies and what does it really mean? And our brain can use ketones, but it burns sugar. What I'm learning is most of it is wrong. Uh, our diets, technically, we could pretty much eat anything. We've thrived and survived on so many different diets throughout the world. So we're really trying to better understand what I call the human Ferrari. What's the best way to learn to take care of this? And the kiltz keto lifestyle or fertile lifestyle, maybe what I should be sharing that conversation is eat less frequently, add more fat, and add more positivity to your life, no matter what you're suffering from. Because even this fertility journey that makes us mad and sad and emotional and a little crazy, we all know as human beings, we can foster a more spiritual, positive, loving, and kind environment, and we control that too.
Well, let's start with that, or at least with the first part. Eating more. Did you say eat more frequently or eating less frequently?
Less frequently, because we are immensely built to get fat, and getting fat is natural and normal, and trying to be skinny is not. It turns out that storing fat is great for your fertility. I do not label anyone as overweight, obese, or as unhealthy. To me, whoever you are, you come to CNY Fertility, and our job is to learn and understand you and give you ideas how to conceive and deliver a baby right from where you're starting from. So, what I learned is thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, we were built to get fat on the carbs that were likely only present at the end of summer and beginning of fall. We were meant to eat them in abundance, along with the fatty meat that we probably ate a lot of. And then we went on a fast. And that fasting is really the key to keto, because ultimately, when you fast, you drop your glucose levels. You do not ever need to eat glucose. And glucose is not the energy of the human Ferrari. Fat is. The get fat gene is the healthiest, best genetics ever created for the human being. But because we've been led to believe the wrong thing, and back to the frequency, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and seeds and nuts in between is a lot of carbohydrates that increases the glucose levels in our bloodstream, increases the insulin levels, and causes a tremendous amount of disease within our body. So if you only ate one time a day, you would significantly reduce the load of glucose in your body. That might be all it takes.
So, would you say that's perhaps how our forefathers ate?
Our mothers and grandmothers and fathers and grandfathers and our infant ancestors thousands of years ago, my opinion, came out of the trees not to eat the grass, but to eat the grass eaters. Now, you may choose not to eat any meat today, but it really is critical that you eat a lot less frequently and you add the fat. And yes, our forefathers and mothers, that's what they did.
But let's talk about the carbs because I almost think that you're telling me I should not be having my daily serving of Oreos. And if that's what you're saying, I don't appreciate it. However, why do we even eat carbs? I mean, our brains and our bodies, they cry out for them until we get used to not doing that. But why is that?
Well, carbohydrates are highly addictive because when they existed in the wild and you didn't eat them, you were dead. And so, whether we're following the herds to wherever they're going, and we might have found some berries and other fruits that were available, you had to eat the carbs. And not being so smart or understanding nutrition ever, we needed to be able to consume the things we like to eat. And sweet says, "Eat me," because I'm going to convert to simple sugar fast, all carbohydrates, all vegetables, all seeds, all nuts, all fiber, all fruit basically breaks down to simple sugar in your gut, goes to the liver, converts to fat, distributed everywhere because your body wants fat storage. What's a carb? Lettuce is a carb, kale is a carb, a carrot is a carb. Everything from a plant is pretty much 90% a carb. There's only a small amount of protein and a small amount of fat in a plant. And
Now,
so,
wait a minute, because kale, they call it, it's a superfood. Super must mean it's fabulous for us. And not only that, my mother told me I have to eat my broccoli every night. Are you telling me
well,
my mother was wrong?
well, she loves you and had the best intentions for you to be healthy. But what I'm suggesting is that maybe a little bit of broccoli from time to time was okay, but the dose makes the poison. As I'm reading more and more about this, the fact that we eat our low level poisons 3 to 6 times a day accumulates over time, and that's where the damage and disease is. Red meat is the healthiest thing you can eat. And I understand if people don't want to eat it, but ultimately it contains all the minerals and vitamins, all the amino acids and fatty acids that a human body requires. And in fact, you have no requirement for broccoli. But those who sell broccoli and kale and vegetables are sharing a concept and idea that I don't think is part of the true nature of health and wellness and nutrition for the human Ferrari.
So, what is keto? How do I do it? All right, so I eat a meal a day. Maybe intermittent fasting is an important piece of that. But what goes in my mouth? So, because it sounds like what you're saying is that what goes in my mouth really affects that level of inflammation in my body.
You can eat pretty much anything, but if you're allergic to it and you don't know it, that's where the disease happens. We're all allergic to something. In general, plants have proven to be more allergenic, more immunogenic than anything else. So are fish, so are shellfish. They tend to have more antigenic properties than cows and pigs and goats and lamb and chicken and turkey or ducks in general. All right. Now we all have our beliefs on food, but in general, if you're eating a plant, be very narrow. Cook it well to disarm the phytochemicals and the plant antigens. And in my opinion, add either butter, cream, eggs, or if you're a vegan, add coconut fat oil or hemp seed oil or olive oil. But fat technically comes from an animal where oils industrially come from plants and they contain the phytochemicals that may actually disrupt our reproduction. And one other little point, plants are live organisms. They too don't want to be eaten. But rather than running away, they've developed a mechanism of poisons, including pesticides that kill bacteria, yeast, viruses, and grasshoppers, but they disrupt the herbivores, omnivores' reproduction. And there's a great journal, the United States Department of Agriculture, on plant poisons to livestock, that when I read, I'm like, come on, no way. And simple stories, which are hard to believe because I too didn't believe it. But again, eat whatever you want. But if you do it one time a day and add the fat, it's healthier than you ever imagined.
Tell me a little bit more about that fat. What kind of fat should we be eating? Because conventionally, and I can remember even one of my first lectures in medical school all those years ago was that fat's supposed to be bad for you.
Well, it turned out to be the opposite is true. So we see men and women that are overweight who tend to have more diabetes, hypertension, cancer, stroke, and the chronic diseases. So we thought, aha, they're overweight, they're fat, it must be fat. But in fact, we get fat because we eat sugar. But remember, we don't consider vegetables sugar. So we were miffed. So you might be eating lots of fruits and vegetables and exercising tremendously, but still get fat and still get the diseases. Fat is a necessary, important component for our diets. When you eat fat, it goes to your lymphatics, not to your liver. The fat suppresses inflammation in the bowels, the lymphatics throughout your body. And in actuality, fat is what we figured out how to make soap with. Bottom line is, we're not eating our soap. We should be eating our soap, which will clean our intestines, help our bowels move, stop eating fiber because it's the cause of bowel inflammation. And bowel inflammation causes uterine, ovarian, prostate, testicular inflammation. And it actually turns out to be the cause of disease. Wild, right?
So the principle of keto is high fat, moderate protein, and low to no carb.
We don't need very much protein. Our body converts the majority of amino acids to sugar in the liver in order to make fat and store fat. You don't need many proteins. I really consider kiltz's keto high fat, low protein, zero to extra low carbs. Now, I do have chocolate or ice cream or potatoes once in a while, but the true, I think carnivore kiltz's keto diet is what I do is ultra low carbs, a little bit of protein, but mostly fat. But that's not our world. So if you eat whatever you're eating that one time a day, you'll really reduce the sugar. And technically, let's go to ketones. Ketone bodies, acetoacetate, beta hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. They're always in our bloodstream. Acetyl CoA from fatty acids is always shifted back and forth. It's likely a fuel source in our body along with acetyl CoA. Sugar is not. But basically, when you go on a fast, your glucose levels drop, your ketones surface, and we call that ketosis. But in reality, the real diet is just a low carb diet. You keep your glucose low, you feel better, your mind is better, your energy's better. So 99% of our blood vessels are small capillaries. The capillaries are very sensitive to too much glucose. The glucose damages those microvessels, which feed every cell of our body. When they get damaged, we get hypertension, one of the earliest diseases so many people suffer from. By reducing glucose levels overall and eating only the one meal a day, you drop the glucose, your body's happy because you're always burning the fat that you store in your body. You're not you're not converting sugar to acetyl CoA rapidly in order to use that for energy. You must make fat in the liver via insulin, which converts sugar and amino acids to fatty acids in order for us to thrive and survive. So, keto, look, I just love to blow it up. And basically, what's a healthy anti inflammatory diet? It's simple one meal, high fat, low to no carbs. And if you're allergic to something or you're diseased, it's because you're eating something that you're allergic to but you just don't know it.
And just from your experience, I do want to say Rebecca has made an excellent point. You can have family without a baby, and that's very, very true. In our world at CNY Fertility, tell us about some of your experiences, and then we'll start to get to some questions about folks with fertility concerns who have turned to diet and the changes that you've seen in their bodies that have resulted in miracles.
Well, I didn't believe it when I first learned about this 10, 15 years ago. I focused a lot on mindfulness and the power of the brain and thought. I tripped onto this paleo diet and keto diet through people who were suffering, but found a diet that got them pregnant. So I learned that they're doing something. I read and read and read and read and explored this until I began to do it myself. Bingo, my diseases went away. So many people have gotten pregnant on keto and stayed pregnant on keto. And one of the questions was, what do I do when I'm pregnant? Well, in actuality, keto, in my opinion, is so critical when you're pregnant, and it's a life plan. The diseases that cause miscarriage are the same thing that cause infertility, cause early pregnancy, delivery, and even fetal demise in the 20s and 30 weeks, which happen because of a high plant-based low-fat diet, in my opinion, and eating like a grazing animal, which every doctor and nutritionist is telling us that's the healthy way to eat. But in fact, it is not. But again, so many people get pregnant, have babies without the diet. There are lots of ways to do this. We're just sharing one idea that you might say, well, gee, nothing else has worked. I've tried all the drugs. Or what can I do on my own, Dr. Kiltz, that's going to help me, my partner, build our family that is different than you've heard before?
We had a good question earlier, and that was, by the way, thanks so much for being with us. It's about 4:32 Eastern time, and Dr. Randy Fink here in Miami with Dr. Rob Kiltz in Syracuse, and we're talking to the CNY Fertility Nation, and we're so happy to have you with us. Let's start to get to some questions, and one of the first ones that I saw that caught my eye was, tell me about supplements. We've talked about keto. We've talked about inflammation. Is there something over the counter that you recommend that helps with that inflammatory process? What do you take?
Well, I personally take no supplements. I drink water, coffee, tea with no added anything. I personally eat fatty ribeye steak with duck liver and butter and salt every day. That's my go to meal. And I rarely eat much of anything else because what I've learned is that the liver and the organ meats contain all the minerals and vitamins your body needs. Now, if you're not eating that, then that's where the supplements and molecular fertility supplements that we have offered, I think, cover all the general needs that a human body has. But rather than a supplement, why don't we do it in the healthy diets that we're meant to eat? One of the challenges and interesting components about a plant-based diet, the plants that we eat actually chelate the minerals and vitamins in the gut and actually expel them out the other end. That's why so many people have vitamin D deficiencies or have anemias and so many other deficiencies because you can't get enough supplements that are going to take care of them when all you're doing is using the chelation particles of the plants. Remember, plants want those minerals and vitamins for themselves. So they've learned how to chelate them and suck them up through their roots. Well, they're just on a journey to get back to the earth and provide those minerals and vitamins for their brethren.
Audrey asks a great question, and it's, once you have embraced the keto lifestyle, how long do you think it is before all those circulating sugars become quiescent and you really are, well, once you're in ketosis, how long before the body starts to adapt?
I don't measure ketones. I don't count calories. In my opinion, that is not necessary. And as I mentioned, I don't do use anything that says keto friendly, keto flour, keto anything. But I would say that it takes about a week or two for the body to adapt. What we're really working to do is empty the bowels of all the inflammatory particles, then allowing the bowels to heal. The glycobiome of the glycocalyx lines the bowels. That's what's damaged. And there are nests of bacteria, yeast, and viruses and inflammatory processes going on the bowels that allow that stuff to get in. The glycocalyx is a Teflon layer of technically glycans, sugar, protein particles that are attached to the lipoprotein layer of the cells. So it takes about 2 weeks. Your body is going to reject you. It's going to diarrhea and vomiting and nausea and like feeling lousy. And the keto flu will drive you nuts. It wants you to eat carbohydrates because we're addicted to them. The things we're addicted to, we're going to fight for and we're going to believe we need them. But for me, it took another month or two for finally my bowels to clear out. It's adding the fat. This is where bone broth comes in, bone marrow comes in. But you can even do a bone broth as whether you're eating chicken or fish or other organ meats. But again, as a vegan vegetarian, this is where I think it's really important to add the fat, whether it's butter, cream, or coconut oil, which is another way of basically lubricating the bowels, helping it heal. Because what do we put on our skin? We're putting lanolin, which is what? Fat.
Nahid asks about cytokines. Can you talk a little bit about cytokines? And for those who don't know what that is, maybe give a little bit of background.
Well, our body has a immunologic immune response. It has a cellular and it has a chemical reaction. Our body initially reacts by creating a redness, the dilation of the blood vessels. It allows the fluids to seep into the tissue that's damaged. The histamines, the cytokines are calling on the troops that say, hey, we need help over here. There's a foreign invader. And so, in fact, all of these things are just natural processes to health and wellness and healing. NK cells, white cells, cytokines. There's a whole list of all these particles that are important for your you being alive and healing, right? So remember, chronic inflammation exposure to all these plant antigens and these phytochemicals and this excessive heat in the bowels from fermentation and exercise causes damage, DNA and cellular damage that then requires the cytokines, the chemokines, the NK cells, and more that are critical for your normal immune response. They're just signals that say to us, hey, you have inflammation. My personal bias is I don't need those tests to tell me you have inflammation. If you're infertile or miscarrying or have any other disease, autoimmune disease, as we've labeled them, you have inflammation. These are just markers of inflammation.
Well, Michaela wants to know is keto hard on the kidneys?
The kidneys are suffering from the inflammation of our diet, which is high carb, low fat, too much protein. The kidneys are doing what they do, but because they're damaged and they're spilling things off. So technically, all this stuff about ketogenic diets being deadly, and dangerous is not true. When I went to Kiltz's keto lifestyle, my kidney stones went away, my bladder bleeding went away, my rectal bleeding went away. So in fact, keto is actually the healthiest thing we can ever do, but we're all made to be afraid of this term keto. Now, if you're keto, but it's not working, my bet is this label keto, you're not doing the right thing. You're likely eating something that you're allergic to. And the allergies affect the kidneys, one of the most critical areas that are damaged in our bodies from a standard Western global diet.
you know, Navita brings up a great point. She's planning for a frozen transfer and is asking, should she be doing keto? She's having difficulty with it because when she adds fat, her cholesterol goes up. Oh, the cholesterol. The primary care doctor tells you your cholesterol is through the roof. You must be doing something crazy.
Cholesterol as a cause of disease is all man-made to sell drugs, in my opinion, and scare us. If you don't have cholesterol, you're dead. The actual giving of drugs to lower your cholesterol is defeating the point of making your hormones, making all the necessary neurotransmitters, and actually making all the egg, the sperm, the embryo, and healing your body. In fact, we've been given a incorrect story. Sugar causes inflammation, and since sugar and proteins go to the liver, and both of those things are converted to fat, and then we're going like, oh my God, you have disease and you have high cholesterol. But in fact, your high cholesterol is simply from a high plant-based diet, low-fat diet, and also eating 3 to 6 meals a day. The stories are hard. Jimmy Moore wrote some great stuff. There's a lot of good stuff, but the problem is you're going to get on the internet, your doctor is going to scare you. My sister died of diabetes, and I can tell you the diabetic diet killed her. My best friend Dave died of cancer, and I know why. His healthy lifestyle killed him. And so, in fact, what we're sharing is something that's so radical. I didn't want to believe it, but until I did it, I'm like, whoa, amazing. The story is simple. Fat is the fuel for the human body. Eating fat reduces inflammation. Stop measuring your cholesterol, in my opinion. You might look at ESR or CRP, which are measurements of inflammation that might be able to help you. If you have antithyroid antibodies or thyroid disease or hypertension, these are other things to help. If you have a very high AMH or a very low AMH, other markers of inflammation, in my opinion, that I think the ketogenic lifestyle, but Dr. Kiltz's fertile lifestyle, and I wrote a book called The Fertile Feast, which is really sharing these concept ideas. And listen, I wouldn't be so radically crazy on sharing a story if I haven't seen it infinite times. And seeing why fertility has really offered something so different than anyone else in this Western world of fertility, affordability, quality, access, integrating Eastern and Western, but financing everyone. And why would I talk about diet if it wasn't changing the world that I see? My job as a physician is to give you advice that you never have to see me. You're simply having babies without us. And the more we can help you do that and learn the causes of disease, which are simply a diet that is incorrect for the human Ferrari. Our DNA is more like a lioness and a lion than an herbivore. But it's really hard to believe. And I know that I took a while to believe this, and sharing this story is getting me in trouble a lot. But I love you guys so much that I want to give you a story that will help you without us doctors.
And it's a good point there too, that if you're just tuning in with us and we're talking about keto, kiltz is keto and inflammation, you might be hearing about this for the first time. If you've been around CNY fertility and you've had treatments with us, then you know that kiltz is keto is a very important part of how we approach fertility. Juliana asks a great question, and that has to do with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But if I'm eating all that fat and I'm storing all that fat in my liver, isn't that part of the problem?
Okay, so alcoholic fatty liver disease is from being an alcoholic. Alcohol is a sugar, essentially. It goes to the liver, it converts to sugar, it converts to fat, and voila, fatty liver. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is basically saying, gee, we don't know why you have a fatty liver. Well, in fact, because we eat a high plant-based 3 to 6 meal a day and we eat a low-fat diet. Almost no one eats a high-fat diet. Sorry, because even frying foods is boiling the the food in oil, which you take it out, it all drips out. I've measured the oils when I've done this. almost all the oil is still in the pan. It is not true that fat causes fatty liver disease. Sugar does. And what people don't know, what is sugar? Well, gee, it's not lettuce. Well, if lettuce isn't sugar and it's not protein and it's not fat, what is it? This is the crazy story. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and I see it so much, by the way. Fatty liver tells me you have a lot of
As
inflammation. That's it.
just as an aside, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the most common reason that people have elevated, even slightly, sometimes slightly elevated liver function tests, sometimes significantly elevated, but the most common reason in the United States for people to have abnormal liver function tests. So in my world, I see it every single day. So you're saying that a high fat diet can actually may even be curative to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
The beauty of eating fat is it reduces inflammation, it reduces your appetite, it's satiety, it helps your bowels feel better, your brain feel better, and your egg, sperm, and embryos feel better, and your uterus. So in actuality, the truth is that your body wants fat, and you either eat fat and it goes right to your fat stores, or you make fat from all vegetables, all proteins. Sorry. And the liver and insulin is required to do that. So, our real truth here is that your body has no requirement to ever eat sugar. Your body makes it naturally. You must eat essential amino acids, which are all in all meat, and you must eat essential fatty acids, which also come in real animal meat, whether, again, it's pork or lamb or duck or whatever it is. So the story of what we have wrong with us is cognizant dissonance. We have been taught that eating fat is deadly, but in fact, eating carbs is the deadly cause of every disease. So many suffering from COVID basically are highly metabolically damaged. The metabolic cause is really the problem with everyone. But lettuce and kale and salad is so good. And how many women are eating that to try to lose weight, but they don't? And then we do a gastric bypass surgery of some form, and it still doesn't work. Modern medicine is directed towards drugs and procedures. And like me in fertility world, we do all these things. I'm a Western trained surgeon. So I've learned so much. But if I can teach you the little trick, that's what we want to do.
There was a question earlier about, well, what kind of laboratory tests can we look at to track inflammation? And you mentioned a C-reactive protein, and there are a number of more complicated things that your physician can order. One of the things that we use in the functional medicine community is simply in our regular old blood count in a CBC. We look at a ratio between lymphocytes to monocytes. So if you have a copy of a CBC or a blood test that you've done to show whether you're anemic and what your immune system is doing, the lymphocyte to monocyte ratio, we want ideally to be in the 5, 6, 7 range. So if you put lymphocytes over monocytes and you do that as a division equation, 5, 6, 7, the higher that number is, the less inflammation we have. The more inflammation we have, the lower that number. So Dr. Kiltz, we talked about cytokines, and I think we even might have mentioned cytokine storm as it pertains to the COVID virus. Erica asks, well, what about NK cells? Because that's something that we see all the time in the fertility world.
So, if you're suffering from a disease or a medical problem, you have inflammation. There is no test required to tell us what the cause is, but we do look at NKs, white cell ratios, ESRs. We look at cytokines, Th1, Th2 ratios, ANA, ACA, lupus. There are just an infinite number of tests that we use to say, aha, you have inflammation. But again, if you have a disease and a problem, you have inflammation. So I personally am not one to run down all these tests because I already know the problem. What test do I need to tell me the treatment? I already know that whatever the disease is, the treatments are going to be related to the mind and the mouth, and whether you're doing massage or acupuncture or cooling the body down, by the way, getting off the treadmill. This is where Tai Chi and yoga come in, or icing the body down. These are all important things to reduce inflammation, along with the amazing drugs like IVIG, Humira, the biologics. We use those all the time. Now, how do I know you need that? Unfortunately, these tests don't tell us which one you need. These are things that we do in order to help you. It's kind of like in vitro fertilization. The real requirements for IVF were initial block tubes. That was it. So, gee, you're failing at IUI and it's sex. Well, we can do IVF, which is very expensive. And unfortunately, the success rate isn't quite as good as we'd like it to be. So, we're just sharing some ideas that most people in the fertility world say that inflammation and immunology doesn't matter. Now, I consider myself a reproductive immunologist, by the way. I practice it, I treat it, and we are in it 100%. We can look at all these numbers, but the question is, what drug do we use based on those numbers? And unfortunately, it doesn't tell us that.
I do want to say thanks to all the people who've written questions. We haven't been able to get to all of them today. Really appreciate you being here. I do want to call attention to Mrs. Carmichael, who I'm so sorry to say had a blighted ovum, and at 6 weeks was diagnosed just yesterday. And our heart goes out to you. It's a very tough thing to deal with. So our thoughts and prayers are with you. She says she follows animal-based diet. Her husband doesn't. Do you think something like a blighted ovum is affected by diet?
Well, whether it's a blighted ovum or spontaneous miscarriage or an empty sac or whatever it is, they're all the same. We're just looking at something via ultrasound and we're giving it a name. But ultimately, an unsuccessful pregnancy is secondary to either a bad egg, which you can't see from the outside, a bad sperm, a bad embryo, or a bad uterine environment. All right. So it is, in my opinion, very important for men to follow the same lifestyle we're talking about here. Kiltz's fertile lifestyle or ketogenic lifestyle, whatever you want to label it. Get off the treadmill and cool the body. Add the molecular fertility supplements for the male and the female. The one meal, high fat, low carbs, one snack, maybe. I think they're important. Once you're pregnant, stay kiltz's keto lifestyle as you can, in my opinion. And this is why we also recommend our immune protocols, which include aspirin, Lovenox, prednisone, lipids, low dose naltrexone. And then we go to the bigger guns like IVIG, Humira, Plaquenil, Prograf, Neupogen. And so there are lots of things we add to the story, and even laparoscopy, hysteroscopy for endometriosis. I've seen so many women have that early loss, get the laparoscopy, hysteroscopy, or do the medical treatment for the immune endometriosis, and voila, they deliver a baby the next time. So the hardship to this journey is often we want to give up. It's too hard. I'm too frustrated. There aren't enough answers. But that's where you want to put your mind and your mouth to the mission of fertility and have faith in this greater power that's leading all of us to a better place. And fertility, we are learning so much more, and that's why the CNY global family is what we're learning from. And I'm really appreciative to Dr. Fink, but also to everyone in this journey that's sharing questions and comments, and even, hey, I don't believe this, Dr. Kiltz, doesn't make sense. And I agree with you. It doesn't make sense. But we're here to listen and learn no matter what your diet belief is or your spiritual belief is. We're all going to learn and be on this journey together.
Portia asked, I think earlier, and mentioned it again here, and I think you said something before about fasting. Did I lose you?
We lost Dr. Fink. Would you
Oh,
repeat that question one more time,
I
please?
am back again. Yes. So, do you think, Portia asked before, and I think you may have alluded to it, what about fasting during pregnancy? Once we've achieved the pregnancy, then what happens as far as keto?
If you look at so many mammals, they actually fast once they're pregnant, they hibernate. I think we're exercising too much in pregnancy and we're eating too many meals. It's you must stay on Kiltz's fertile lifestyle, in my opinion, which is slow it down, cool it down. The fasting is the lasting and the best way to pregnancy survival because plants have pesticides and they have abortificants within them. They want you not to reproduce and they want you not to survive. In my opinion, it really is a crazy concept. The more I've learned this, but keto is critical once you're pregnant. It'll reduce the miscarriage, and fasting is the most amazing thing we can do. That's why the one meal at night to rest and digest is so important, in my opinion.
I've heard you say that before about plants want to kill you. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, plants have been around for millions of years before us, and they've evolved, and they are invasive species. They know how to kill other plants. They know how to get into environments that they are not natural to. We have helped them on their way. But a live plant cell, live cell, makes products and their chemicals and their other outward products, including thorns and even if you think about poison ivy, go eat poison ivy, see what it does to your inside, along with eat cayenne and peppers. What does it do in garlic? But plants are predators, and they want to kill us or prevent us from reproducing or use us for their reproduction. My bet
They
is
want to turn us into their fertilizer.
they are smarter than you and I because we are actually propagating plants more than we understand how important we are to their survival. But in fact, they have turned the tide.
Hey, we're so happy everybody was able to join us today. We have just a few more minutes, and I want to just throw a quick question to Dr. Kiltz about endometriosis because we've had several questions about this. Is surgical or medical treatment preferred? But by the same token, do you suppose the anti-inflammatory lifestyle can have any effect on endometriosis?
Well, if you reduce inflammation in your gut and your pelvis, you will reduce the inflammation from endometriosis. I personally believe that endometriosis is a reflection of bowel and colon and rectal inflammation. And absolutely, whether it's using drugs or diet, it will absolutely change and reduce inflammation. I've seen so many conceive and deliver babies on these concepts. One quick question, if I can just bring it to the point about from Carrie Anderson. What about mammals that are herbivores? Well,
Yeah.
herbivores have a GI tract that's meant to ferment and break down the grasses and the grains into the sugars that then can go to the liver and be converted to fat, by the way. So they are actually built to eat grass and grains. We can, no doubt about it. But if you look at Weston Price's information on how the wild human animals of the savages actually were healthier than humans in the modern domesticated world, because in the domesticated world we've been tamed to eat grass and grains in abundance. Well, in the ancient wild world we ate mostly fatty meat. I'm just telling you what our ancient truth is of who we were, but we are capable of eating everything and anything. But now you're trying to figure out the cause of the disease. Remember, we're not a four-legged grass eating animal. We're a stand up erect hunter that learned how to make spears and axes and gunpowder and bullets and many things to hunt and kill. Now, again, I'm just giving the historic nature of humans. Whatever you choose to eat is up to you, and we honor that 100%. But we should be eating a high fat, low to no carb, and low to moderate protein diet, in my opinion.
Doc, as we wrap it up today, what are the resources that people can turn to? You mentioned your book on keto. If people want to learn more about keto, where do they turn?
Well, if you look at our website, drrobertkiltz.com, we have a lot on keto. Look at Maria Emmerich and Craig Emmerich, really rocking. Andres Ianfeld at dietdoctor.com. Ken Berry, really awesome and some great stuff. He primarily talks about carnivore keto as I do, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that they can pretty much do keto even as a vegan or vegetarian. And then Georgia Eid, really amazing diagnosis diet, has some fantastic stuff. But there's so many resources out there. I'm watching YouTube and reading these books. But if you go to Amazon, Dr. Kiltz's Fertile Feast and Ketogenic Lifestyle, I personally believe they offer a tremendous amount of information that you can learn from. You may not believe it. I love to read things I don't believe in, and I've learned so much that has changed my life. And medicine is a ministry to me. Our job is to really be 24/7, 365 indoctrinated in being a doctor in health and wellness. We are working for you, with you, to listen and learn every day, but immense resources that we share in our lives. We're grateful to Dr. Fink and all of our other practitioners to sharing and what you guys are sharing every day. But remember, no matter the disease, it's all caused by inflammation. And it's likely due to a low fat, high carb, mostly plant-based diet, unfortunately.
Hey, CNY Nation, we're so glad you could be with us this afternoon and hope you'll take the opportunity to join us again next week, same time, because I think we've come up with a bunch of interesting kinds of topics that we can address in terms of wellness. So thanks so much for all your questions. Thanks for Dr. Kiltz and his brilliance and expertise, and frankly, also just the good spirit that comes from you, Dr. Kiltz. We're so happy to have you as a part
Well,
of our lives.
Randy, Dr. Fink, we're so grateful to what you're bringing to the team. And so many of us were opening up in Sarasota, getting our Atlanta office, but we are still here to take care of everyone around the globe. And again, these questions are really amazing. Well, I'll see you back on Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern time for the Fertile Fireside Chat. But Dr. Magarelli and many others, Dr. V and other people on our team are sharing more, but I'm even looking to do more daily lives to continue to share ways for you to find your fertility on natural. So again, love you guys and thank you and blessings to all of you. See you guys.